Good evening and welcome to the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting, August 4th, 2021, 4 p.m. This meeting is called to order. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
City Attorney Joden.
Here.
City Manager Harlow Schulk.
Here.
Commissioner Halliday.
Here.
Commissioner Dean.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Laughlin.
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here. Thank you. Recommendations from Helena Citizens Council. Joseph Lehman. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I apologize. I'm trying to find Mr. Lehman in the attendees.
He says he's on. I see he just sent a note say I'm on.
He has his mic now, Mr. Mayor.
You have the floor, Mr. Lehman.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'd like to provide some updates on the Helena Citizens Council. I'm pleased to report that we have nearly a full membership. We have one opening in District 4, otherwise we are completely full, and look to actually have some competitive races in the fall for the council, so that's good news for us. In our last meeting, we passed a composting recommendation that we would like to send on to the commission that addresses City Code 6-1-17. So we had some good discussion on that and passed that forward. We also heard from the Helena Water to discuss the water rationing as it stands now in the future for that. And those are my updates.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. Any comments or questions from the commission? Thank you, Mr. Lehman.
Thank you.
City Manager's report. We update to the commission on the status of police reform working groups. And Harlow Schulk.
Hi there, Mayor. Thank you. This is the item which has been moved forward from June. And the intent is to provide you and the commission an update on the work so far on the civilian review groups, reform groups. Just as a quick summary, in response to summer and fall of 2020, the police department and you all had several discussions around matters in the community. These conversations resulted in the interim manager being directed to implement several working groups. Those working groups were further brought to you upon my start on October 19th was my first day with you all. And at that time, I started working with Police Chief Hagan on the implementation of those working reform groups. Part of those discussions included two groups which launched in the spring of this year and have completed their work, and wanted to provide update to you on those tonight. Also to receive clarification on them, next steps for one, and then additionally, next steps moving forward. As you're aware, Chief Hagan has announced his retirement. It does play into the timing and the work we will be doing, and I just want to put that in your minds as we begin to start talking about next steps and the potential focus that we need as a city in support of transitioning a new police chief into the community. So with that, I'll get started. Just in quick summary, you all have had this memorandum for, well, since June. And since that time, there's been continuations. The first both of them were because all of you wanted to make sure you were participating in this meeting. And I appreciate that this is an important topic to the community. and also have want to share some parts and pieces that have continued to move since my starting. The first is that the school superintendent had turned in tendered their resignation, and it had transitioned to the new superintendent, Rex Wells. Rex is on the line. Rex didn't start really until July 1, as I understand it, but I'll let him share that with you later. I'll have him on to provide any follow-up questions and answers and thoughts. And then, so that slowed quite a bit some of the work that we were doing. Additionally, we had some difficulty just overall with the pandemic, moving things along and finding facilitators and identifying outcomes. So thankfully, I managed the facilitation on the first of them, which was the Civilian Review Board. The Civilian Review Board, as a reminder, a working group, was intended to discuss the potential for a review board at complaint of and against a police officer, different than the current police board that we have in place, which is has a completely different purpose. So the Civilian Review Board working group, which the mayor and I believe Commissioner Dean were part of, that working group also included our human resources team, the Bob Wood, who was a retired municipal court judge, Jeff Sherlock, an additional retired district court judge. We had Courtney Smith and Judith Heilman from the social justice team at the Montana Racial Equity Project. Steve, of course, Chief Hagan was on, as well as Harry Johnson, as part of the Montana Police Officer Standards and Training, as well as Karen Bryson, who was our police commissioner, and last, a citizen, Tom Cherry. All spent 3 meetings focused on identifying the outcome of what a civilian review board would do and their role in the process of reviewing complaints. That information is provided within, and the team is pleased to report, I'm pleased to report that first, I don't want to facilitate another one. Not because I didn't enjoy it or the group, they were fantastic to work with, but it's really difficult to be the city manager and also facilitate and maintain that neutral point of view, and which I believe I was able to do, and offer up an opportunity here in a second for Mayor Collins, you or Commissioner Dean to offer any thoughts you have on that working group. We're very excited. We have a lot of work in creating that working group, and we'll bring more details to you in its establishment in the fall as we move further into discussions and kind of really, we have some vetting we need to do against transparency details and what we can offer up through civilian advisory boards. And we're really excited though to get that work started. And I appreciate all of the work of the volunteers, the citizens, and the team who participated. I'm not sure, Mayor Collins or Commissioner Dean, if you want to offer up any other comments on that working group.
No, I don't have any comments. Just that I just thought the group worked well, and they had their heart in it, and I thank them for all that they put forth for us to have gone through what we went through. So thanks to the group, and also kudos to you, Rachel. Commissioner?
Yeah, I would echo everything that the mayor has just mentioned. I think, Rachel, you did do a good job of being in the facilitator role. So kudos to you. I would also, just want to thank everyone. As the mayor said, the group was just really thoughtful, and the conversations were really excellent, I thought. And I'm excited because we really are kind of blazing a new trail in Montana within this area, and it all started with the great conversations that came out of that group. So I'm really excited to see some of the actions that we can take moving forward. And I think we've also identified some areas where, as a state, we need to find some improvements so that local government can really respond in the way that we see is most helpful to our community. So really proud of the work of that group, and just sincerely thankful for all the effort that they put in.
Thank you. Madam Howell-Shaw.
Great, thank you. If you have any other follow-up questions on that work group, I'll just continue forward with the team in establishing and vetting through that process and coming back to the commission on the next steps in implementation and how we can continue to move forward. Really appreciated everyone's time in the community on that. And I think also would like to work with you, the clerk's office, to send out thank yous from all of you to those who participated, so they know and hear from you that your thanks. The second civilian review, the second police reform group that took off was the school resource officer conversation. Originally, when I started at the city, sorry.
Rich, excuse me, Madam Howell-Shaw, can we have some questions and answers before we move to the next one? So do we have any comments or questions from the commission? No comments. Do we have any public comments? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I have no hands raised in this meeting, and I have received no written public comment on this item.
Thank you. Madam Howell-Shaw, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I want to, I shared that Superintendent Wells has joined us this evening, and welcome. I know he's just getting started and getting us all ready for the fall school year. And also we have Barrick Abramson, who represents the Keystone Group. They were the facilitators and were part of our managing our conversation with the school resource officers. And then also Chief Hagan is on the line as well. I want to also just summarize the participants that were part of the school resource officer conversation. These were all who were invited to participate. They were Walt Chansey, a school district employee, Ryan Chrisman, a citizen, Eric Coate from the City Attorney's Office, Tracy Dahl from the School Mental Health Services at Intermountain, Commissioner Dean, Kay Durand, who was a student at the high school at Helena High, Jenna Eisenhardt, School Mental Health Services at Chaudhary, Darren Gaub, a citizen, Judith Heilman, member of the social justice team in the Montana Racial Equity Group, Equity Project, Thomas Jordan, our city attorney, Akila Lane from the ACLU, Leah Lindgren, Court Services, Juvenile Probation, Kelly McBride, Criminal Justice Services, student, an additional student whose name was withheld because of their status as a student at, the additional high school. Goodness. And then Commissioner O'Laughlin, Kate Peterson, school district employee, Brett Petty, Helena Police Department, Gianluca Pisciarelli, I'm sorry, I butchered her last name, the Mobile Crisis Response Team, Dennis and Rivera, a citizen, Courtney Smith from the Montana Racial Equity Project, Susan Smith, a citizen, Christy Stevenson, also from the Mobile Crisis Response Team, Roy Tannehill, previous school resource officer, Ben Tinsinger, also a parent, Jaden Van Steenvoort, Samantha, Jaden was with the Mobile Crisis Response Team, Samantha Bowles, Helena Indian Alliance Youth Coordinator, and Brandon Wooten, Helena Police Protective Association, HPPA. I also want to add, we did include more as we began the conversations. We had several who did not and were not able to participate. That includes the students. They were not able to participate. Our social justice team chose not to participate as well. Although invited, we also had Jay and I'm trying to, I don't want to butcher his last name as well, but he was also a parent at the school. Our intention with the large group that we, and I'll get it right here. Hold on one second. I don't want to butcher it again. In the big picture, the intention was to offer up an opportunity for me to hear why and what the purpose of the school resource officers were. As you recall, I came on to the city in October and was asked to implement the MOU with the school district. Again, the superintendent was leaving, and either way, I had not been a participant in those conversations. I had observed and listened to the conversations online that had taken place over the summer, and I was aware of the points of view. I also, as the city manager and the police department reports to me, needed to understand why the police officers in particular were being asked to participate in the way they were, if there were concerns, particularly in the school, that ultimately resulted in this conversation. These were all things I was trying to understand as the city manager who is now leading the police department. And why would that matter? I guess in the big picture, I need to hold the team accountable for the outcomes. And that means when they're in the school representing the city in the way not only the city wants, but also the way in which our partner at the school district wants us to. And it was very difficult to get participation from the school district, not because they didn't want to, as I understand it, it's just the reality of transitioning over time. And also there was a deadline assigned to me that I try and get this MOU completed by the end of June 30th. And it was not done. I did not do it. And I'll share to you, I feel as though we could have had a variety of directions this could have gone overall. And am I overly satisfied? No. I think that there was an opportunity missed in many ways. And I do believe, though, that I have a clear understanding that the community is very interested in continuing to have school resource officers. And there are students who are very concerned with police officers being in the school. And also there are parents concerned with police officers being in the school. And there are parents who are not concerned that there are police officers in the school. So if you read what I said in this summary, ultimately, I don't believe the city has done a good job of communicating over time what we do as school resource officers. And because of that, there's an opportunity for us to improve. So that's first. And that's what I want to share with you as an expectation of entering into an MOU, that we do a better job of communicating how our school resource officers are used. Additionally, the MOU, as you all know, was really out of date that we had been working from. And the ACLU had published a white paper, which did outline specific expectations and thoughts around how to improve the agreements, which we're reflecting on. And last, the importance of making sure that before I begin moving into this MOU with Rex, that you have an opportunity to ask any further questions and you feel comfortable that I'm heading in the direction you wish. I really want to make sure that the MOU reflects what I heard from and have landed on, which is there are students who need a resource in the school that is not an officer. They have not had the opportunity to speak to, that may not have the opportunity to speak to someone in their circle, in the school or in their home that they need. And that isn't a school resource officer, but I don't know that that is the role of the city to create. And that's the question for you all. What is it that we're hoping to ensure is made available to the school district? Is it only SROs, or is it SROs in addition, a third conversation, a third place for students who won't talk to their parents, won't talk to the superintendent want talk to their school leaders and or police officers. That was the potential there exists to have an advisory board, a third board created by the community, a different kind of leader in the community. Those kinds of conversations with students are very, very tenuous. The state has established an ethics code for police officers that's far beyond what from where I came. That on top of the oath of office that police officers take, all results in an expectation onto officers in their role. In addition, this memorandum of understanding requires that we contemplate the expectations of our officers in the school, and it's clear also what the school is to provide to the students so that we aren't placing our officers in a location they should not be. That is, we are not, and they have not been used for example, any sort of punishment to students in the school. Wanting to make sure that it's very clear in an MOU. Wanting to make sure that the police officers are used and viewed in a way that reflects what you all would like to see happen. I feel confident that we'll be able to get to that space with the school district. But I also want to make sure that you're comfortable adding more resources to the school for those students who potentially are unable to speak with someone in the school or one of our police officers. So I haven't had a chance to talk with you all about this potential advisory board or a potential person in the school, additional resource. That's really what I wanted to hopefully get out of tonight's conversation, is your comfort level with continuing to move forward with an MOU, and asking as part of that the school district work to establish another element for these students. We also had some data and research that Chief Hagan was able to complete around incidents in the school. The officers have had, and we didn't have access to before, but they have had an opportunity to pull information based on actual interactions at the school with the students themselves. That information hasn't been available before. And I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask the questions that you want to ask before I move to the next phase, which is to support your direction of moving into an MOU with the school, and also ask your comfort with me working with the school district to add more resources for those students who do not and won't work with our police officers. So I'll stop there. You've had this report for quite a while. I know you've all had a chance to read it. You've all had lots of thoughts and lots of questions. I know that Commissioner O'Loughlin and Commissioner Dean were part of those conversations. In observation, I was as well. I was doing my best not to, but also support the environment of conversation, which Barrick and the team at Keystone really helped to foster. And I'll stop talking and I'll allow you to ask any questions and share any guidance you would like to. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Howell-Shaw. Do we have any comments or questions from the commission?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
thank you. I'd like to thank the manager and everybody who participated in these particular work groups that we've undertaken so far. And I appreciate the work that has gone into creating the memo that has, provided quite a bit of background information for us today. As to the MOU for the SROs, I'm very supportive of you continuing in the negotiation with the school district for the SROs in Helena School District number 1. As to the providing more resources to support those students who don't feel comfortable with that resource, I guess one of the things that really jumped out at me and I think it's true, in your memorandum was that this needs a leader from the community. Quoting from your memo, who is this leader? I had suggested that the city could partner with the school district and social justice groups to do this work. The social justice team said they would respond when I put it in writing to them. The school district has not responded yet. And this last part, I think, is pretty telling. It says, frankly, the city is in disrepair in so many places. Adding all of these work groups and now another work group is wishful thinking. I do not have the capacity in the city to do this work already, let alone another group. The community needs to step up with a leader. So in terms of resource being provided for those students, apart from the SROs, it would seem like, while the city could be a part of that discussion, it would seem like that perhaps it's kind of incumbent upon the school district to sort of lead that discussion. And I may be wrong in that, but it just seems natural to me, given that it is, within the schools that this resource is needed. So, but those are my comments that I'd like to offer thus far. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any others?
Mayor, may I ask just maybe a quick question to the city manager?
Sure.
So I'll just first also echo my appreciation for those that participated in the work group, and to Barrick and the team at Keystone. I think there were some fairly robust conversations. I think some, challenges with the makeup of the group, but do want to just, share my appreciation for those that participated in this process. City manager, you mentioned that there were a couple students that were asked to participate, though we did not have participation by students in the formal work groups. During your summary tonight, you've mentioned students a couple times, the perception of students and the desire either to not have uniformed armed police in schools and those that do. Can you share where that information is coming from? Did the city or the school district ultimately survey students, or where are those comments coming from that are coming from directly from students?
Thank you, Commissioner O'Loughlin. There is a survey that was shared to the school district, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Wells to share the status of that. As I shared in the beginning, I did watch the videos from over the last summer, which included students, and I also did listen to our social justice team who shared the concerns of students. So I want to give and honor those comments. That's where those sentiments come from. Now, having meetings in March, April, and May at the end of the school year is tough, especially for the students who are hoping to lead the conversation. Also, in transitioning a superintendent, it's just not probably realistic, the timing. And ultimately, it was a pretty difficult wedge to pull out, the student comments. And I think that's what's most interesting of our school board overall. I know there are two new participants that are students on our school board as well, that perhaps Superintendent Wells can also provide input on us in that bigger picture too. I'm not aware, because I don't manage the schools. I'm not sure whether the school board has always had positions from students on it. So I'll turn it over though to Rex, if that's all right.
Thanks, City Manager. Sound check. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Good, great. Thanks, Mayor. Let me go back to the previous question. You're right. again, I'm getting caught up as well. 30 days on the job, right? And just spent a couple of times, a couple of meetings with City Manager Rachel, trying to get caught up to speed. And you're right, there was a transition between superintendents, but I don't want to use that as an excuse. We certainly are willing to be here at the table, to be proactive in it, and with the understanding that we're willing to grow and we're willing to get better. And we certainly look forward to building an MOU with the city that's best resembles and mimics what the city wants, in particular the commission. That being said, where did the student voice come from? Great question. City Manager Rachel, you hit it a little that on those committees, there were seniors that were selected to be on that. And as you remember back to our days as a senior in high school, when May and June rolled around, the last thing you wanted to do is sit on a committee. And they were moving, right? And so it was hard to get a voice there. Certainly as Dr. Ream was transitioning out and I was moving in, there was a quick learning curve. And so we may not have all the voice. There was reference to a survey. That survey, I believe, got to us late. It might have been May, could have been even in June after school's out. So obviously we're not going to be able to conduct a survey until our student body comes back in, right? It would be a pretty invalid survey, if you will, if we pushed it out this summer. So we will go back and get a student voice. We'll work with a survey to find out where our student body sits. We do, and we've always had students that sit on our board of trustees. Great representation, but not the entire student body voice. So I hope that helps. Let me, a caveat going back is that I do appreciate this work. I appreciate City Manager and your efforts to provide, as I believe one commissioner, maybe Ms. Dean said, on the cutting edge, if you will, and we're willing for that. But it's going to take a little work, and in building an MOU together really is a testament to our ability to build a partnership between the city and the school district. And we roughly have 8,000 students, 1,000 staff members, and that's 9,000 people in our community that 4 resource officers are looking over, and we think that's valuable. Can it be better? Absolutely. And I think that's all of us that want to get better. So we're willing to do the work. The timing it didn't happen in June, and we have some work to do, but moving forward, we're in the game.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. One question from me. I've heard that CSC2 is being eliminated. Is that accurate?
That is not accurate. Are they refunding the formula and how it's supported? Yes. There was a couple of month hold to get us through up until September. And as I understand it, it is still in the works, right? They're still figuring out how to fund it. Do I think it's going away? Absolutely not. But okay. there's a heavy lift on how that's going to be, what revenue stream is going to support that moving into this school year.
So, and my 1 cent says, I think if we're looking for other avenues other than the police helping students, that cannot be a better program for students who can't talk to teachers and students who can't talk to the police.
Yeah, I'd like to expand on that a little bit as well, Mayor Collins. That as a high school principal for many years, elementary principal, and a superintendent, but my time in the building, there's no one off limits as a kid wants to talk to, right? If you will, it's going to be a resource officer. I can tell you by name and what resource officer connects. We build relationships, and we can't control what that looks like. And if a student is attracted and feels comfortable and safe to talk to a resource officer, they become that person, right? But it's my custodians, it's my cooks, it's the bus drivers. Everyone has a responsibility to build a relationship with a kid. And I don't say that that's not the resource officer, because it's probably not in their job description, but it is what they do when you are in a school. And it's really powerful. And so, yes, are there other resources? Absolutely, that students may need, but a SRO is that person for that kid. And we value that.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from the commission? Any public comments? Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I do have several hands raised. The first is Samara Sant.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commission. Samara Sant. I represent 406 Back the Blue, roughly 13,000 of your constituents. I believe that last year I made our feelings clear with regards to doing away with SROs. We, as your constituents, believe that it's a very bad decision. We implore you to stop and think about the kids and what you're doing by taking them away. If there's no SRO, it makes our schools extremely vulnerable to those who intend to do harm. All the security procedures in the world cannot replace the proactive intelligence that the SROs are gathering to stop attacks before they happen. Not having an SRO also removes the benefit of faster medical help should something occur. Our SROs are a part of the schools that they serve in our community. They interact with your children all day long in various capacities. They are seen by the kids as a positive role model who help with day-to-day administration and education during regular school hours, after school, and at off-campus school activities. They will often join classes like shop or PE to offer a helping hand. The main goal of an SRO is, of course, to keep your children safe. In a district that has over 8,000 students and over 1,000 staff spread out over the many square miles, having an on-site law enforcement officer who can help in any emergency right away can literally be the difference between your child's life or death. 911 in our district is rarely, if ever, called by a school. Closest estimation is that our SROs eliminate approximately 200 plus calls a year to 911. Additionally, some of our schools are in very rural areas, so the school resource office is their police department. They provide an immediate response to any school-related emergency with zero wait time. This is fundamentally important to our community. They can stop any threat that may occur and act as a crime and violence deterrence. They gather a large amount of intelligence from your children who have no problem telling a beloved SRO if something is going on, whether it's about drugs or fighting or violence of any kind. They can do this in conversation without it being obvious or looking like a snitch. SROs can also see if something appears suspicious and keep an eye out for any developments. This open communication with the SROs between themselves and your children, it creates a safe, non-threatening school environment. If our SROs were not there, there is no way any of your children would feel comfortable calling 911 or the police non-emergency on his or her own, or be seen going to the administrator's office to report something. Not one.
Good. Ma'am, would you wrap up, please?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. And of course, the thing none of us like to think about, but one of the biggest threats to our children today is school shooters. If a shooter were to get into any of our schools, the SRO is of course trained to handle active shooter situations, stop the shooter as fast as possible, and triage anyone who may be injured. Nobody from the outside can be there as fast as an SRO, period. In conclusion, Mayor and Commission, I feel that last year we did unfortunately pander to a national conversation Montana has no challenge with. There was no evidence submitted that Montana has a systemic racial issue or any sort of abuse of power within the SRO system. We do not have a pipeline to prisons in Montana. So I implore you to make the right choice in this conversation and keep SROs in Montana schools. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, next hand raised I have is Keegan Medrano.
You have the floor, Keegan.
Hello there, thank you. Keegan Medrano, Policy Director at the ACLU of Montana. I want to take us back to that summer of 2020, where many Helena residents advocated for drastic police reform, leading to that intense community debate regarding school resource officers. That public comment reflected the divisions within Helena, with nearly 50% stating their opposition to the current SRO model. Instead, meetings were held between the city manager, the police chief, and the school superintendent, excluding the broader community the opportunity to meet, discuss, and collaborate. From this moment and throughout, the city manager has pulled the levers of power in private meetings instead of meaningfully engaging the community through a work group. Instead of facilitating a work group that represented those differing opinions of Helena residents, we were invited to an unwieldy Zoom call of over 27 individuals, now apparently to discuss, as outlined in Ms. Harlow-Schock's memo, the benefits and unintended consequences of having the SRO program in schools. From the onset, the city manager has committed to marginalizing the voices who support alternatives to SROs in the school, has committed to centralizing power to city government bureaucrats, and has committed to framing the entire conversation so as to ensure that the status quo remains. Almost immediately, we recognized that we had to meet and demand changes to this current approach, or we could not continue. We would be doing a disservice to the people of Helena if we continued to participate in this song and dance masquerading as robust and complex policy discussions. We wrote a letter, May 18th, where we clearly stated the following, and this is going to push back against the misrepresentation that appears in this memo, that we would no longer attend meetings unless the composition of the work group is substantially changed and the subject of discussion is expanded to allow for a more robust exploration of the role and purpose. Our stance, unlike the lies and misrepresentation of the city manager, is that we want a meaningful conversation with the appropriate stakeholders present. That doesn't seem unreasonable to us. But again, instead of engaging with us, the city manager did not respond and expressed confusion in emails about what we wanted. So we requested a meeting and held one on June 10th with the city manager. During this June 10th meeting, we reiterated our stance that we wanted the meetings to be a place for policy discussion and reflection, for students and other stakeholders to be present. We wanted this group to work. But again,
Keegan, would you please wrap up?
Certainly. Instead, we got this memo that you all got, and we didn't even get it. And she said that we would not engage in conversations unless the SRO program was ended, full stop, that anything else would be a non-starter for us. And that is categorically untrue and goes against everything we have said and written. Again and again, we have the city manager's voice over our own, the city manager's voice over those of Helena residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Keegan. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, next I have Dennison Rivera.
Go ahead, Mr. Rivera.
Mayor, Commissioner, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you for having me on today. I'd like to start with basically urge you not to be strong-armed by the ACLU. I find the ACLU to be a very menacing organization against minorities and against our Helena community. I believe the ACLU is using minorities as a bandwagon issue to implement their policies in Helena, and it's been happening since the beginning. You know, in the very beginning in June of 2020, we've had you all received numerous letters that were started by the ACLU and other advocacy groups that have been outside organizations that are trying to change this community here in Helena, or Lewis and Clark County, and the truth is that it doesn't represent the community. You just heard comments from the ACLU saying that the 50% of those that were giving public comment were those that were in support of getting rid of SROs, and that's not the truth. You know, the truth is that we have a lot of misinformation in regards to what are SROs and what's their duty, and it's been taken apart to mean something else. So their whole goal in the beginning was to reallocate monies that were going to go into supporting SROs and keeping the program growing to going to some other mental health service. So I guess my whole point is that I believe this is a very sensitive issue that's going to lead to marginalizing actually white kids. It's going to marginalize white people. And the reason why is because in the name of equity, all of a sudden what you're doing is you're putting the needs of what you call people of color over others. That's not the definition of equality. Equality of opportunity is all about all of us having the same opportunity as anyone else and not be discriminated or given advantages based on the color of our skin. And that's what's happening right now. And it's really unfortunate.
Mr. Rivera.
And Mr. Mayor, commissioners, what I'd like to say in the end is that we have to support SROs. We need a clear understanding what their role is. I had a recent interview with Sheriff Jesse Slaughter, who said that is one of the best programs that Montana has. And that's not something you want to get rid of. We need to support SROs. If anything, better train them, make sure we have the right people there. Obviously, this community loves them a lot, and it's not something that we need to get rid of. Let the community decide what they need instead of letting these advocacy groups try to take control of our city. Let the community speak up. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you make the right decision.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, commissioners, the next individual for comment is Sunda Galp.
Go ahead, Ms. Galp.
Hi, thank you for letting me talk. I have a few questions. I wonder why non-residents are allowed to comment about a resident issue. And then I want to thank the people for taking the time to discuss these issues that are seem to be a national issue. As for the students that are having problems with the SROs, I want to express empathy towards them and to tell them just because you're afraid of the SRO doesn't mean they need to be removed. I think it's an education system that needs to help them identify as a police officer is there as a line of defense for them within the school, and then they can go somewhere else to talk. There's so many other leaders. They have great teachers. They have great counselors, like the superintendent said. They have the cooks. They have janitors that they can talk to. The janitors are great to talk to. Some of the students actually see these SROs saving their families at times. And so there's a connection there also. So removing that, sometimes they become a father figure within the school for some of these students. I think educating the students that are having problems with SROs is probably our first line in helping them accumulate to stay engaged with their society. We don't want them to. Our schools are supposed to help them move within our society and become successful within it. And SROs and police officers are the people that help us play by the rules. And so we need to have a good relationship with them. So I really strongly suggest that we keep them in there for now and keep discussing and keep educating our schools and our students as to what police officers' role is. And I think that's a first line of a positive relationship between us and the people that are supposed to make sure we abide by the rules. Thank you, commissioners and mayor.
You bet. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, commissioners, next I have Luke Miscavige.
Go ahead, Mr. Miscavige.
What do you think?
Mr. Mayor, this is Luke. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for your service and for holding this important community discussion. My name is Luke Miscavige, M-U-S-Z-K-I-E-W-I-C-Z. I am a Helena resident and also the chair of the Helena Public Schools Board of Trustees. I just want to make it clear that though I've talked to many students, staff, and fellow trustees about SROs, I am ultimately speaking for myself tonight. First and foremost, and hear this above all else, thank you to the City of Helena for your consistent and generous investment in the over 9,000 students and staff in our schools by funding generously the SRO program. I just really appreciate that, and I'm thankful for this partnership. Do we need additional resources to connect and support our children? Absolutely. Is it inadequate that the state funds only one counselor for every 400 students? Absolutely. Is that your problem to solve tonight as the City of Helena? Probably not. But I think that that only reinforces the value that SROs provide to our schools. So I simply want to say, let's figure out how we can do better. Let's identify the problems in the program and let's solve them instead of giving up on what I think many others consider to be a hallmark of community policing. Thank you very much. And again, I appreciate your leadership to our community.
Thank you, Mr. Muscovich. Madam Clerk?
Mayor and Commissioners, the final hand raised is Courtney Smith.
Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Hi, Mayor Collins. Thank you. I'm with the Montana Racial Equity Project, and one of the stated purposes that the city manager gave for the working group was to discuss what the purpose of the SRO program was. And unfortunately, that was never really discussed. Students weren't included in the conversation, unfortunately, and the responses that we received from citizens within Helena is that they didn't feel safe attending these meetings and their perspectives weren't really represented, which is why we were a part of this working group. And I want to reiterate that racial inequities do exist within our criminal legal system, and they do exist here in Montana. And unfortunately, that happens in the school system as well. So right now, Montana is dramatically lagging behind in staffing counselors, social workers, nurses, and psychologists. And 13% of Montana's public schools don't have any support staff. Indigenous students are arrested at a rate 7 times higher than white students, and students with disabilities are referred to law enforcement 3 times that of their counterparts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Madam, oh, you said that was the last one?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that was our last hand raised. At this time, I have no written public comment on this matter as well.
Okay, thanks. Okay, at this time, commissioners. Did I hear someone? At this time, commissioners, I want to hear from you about allowing the city manager to move forward with the MOU.
Mayor, I have, you can go ahead.
Go ahead, Commissioner O'Loughlin.
Thanks, Mayor. So I guess maybe just a couple thoughts. I appreciated the opportunity to, really just listen in to the conversations. Commissioner Dean and I weren't active participants in the meetings. So just a couple, I think, perspectives, just witnessing those conversations. First, I do think it was somewhat unfortunate that I think the scope of the purpose of the work group was narrowed pretty early on in the process. I think if you go back and look at the original action that the City Commission took during the budget process, it really was a conversation about the best use of city resources, right? Are we utilizing resources in a way that is supporting all students in the school district? And I think that similarly, the ultimate motion that was taken and passed unanimously to restore those funds really set a path forward to have a more holistic conversation about what a potential partnership between the City of Helena Police Department and the school district could look like. I received written confirmation from the city manager in mid-January that yes, that the motion did not direct the city manager to put in place a memorandum that explicitly indicated that armed uniformed police would continue to have physical presence in the school district. And I think that ultimately is a decision that the city manager, I believe, has in the negotiations with the school superintendent. I appreciated the formation of the work group as a way to sort of help inform that discussion, but I think the scope of that discussion was narrowed in a way that made the assumption of maintaining the status quo and really just talking about the pros and cons of that. Second, again, I would just reiterate there were voices that I think originally had been invited, but did not ultimately participate. And I think that, the representation on the work group was not representative of the voices that we heard in the summer of 2020. And I think for many of us, voices that we had been hearing with concerns that were nervous about providing that feedback in a public forum. So I think in my mind, I think the city could have been more intentional about the particular voices that were included on the work group. Moving forward, I mean, I think the reality is, we were behind when we started this conversation. That is, I think a product of things that were outside of our control, leadership transitions that naturally happen, and those in new positions need to get up to speed. So I very much respect and understand that, but I cannot support moving forward with giving direction tonight to move forward with what I believe is the status quo. I don't think that was the direction given by the commission last year. I would be comfortable if, there is a concerted effort to bring in the voices that have not been heard and talk about what that looks like. But from my standpoint, I have real concerns with moving forward with armed uniformed police in the schools, given what we know from the data and what we've heard from students and families.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any others?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, so a couple comments. Do want to echo Commissioner Laughlin's thanks to everyone who participated, not just in this past working group, but really over the last year. And now over a year. I think we'd be getting into 13, 14 months at this point. A couple of things that I just want to note. I do think that, first, I'm really excited the school district is excited about the transition in leadership. I'm really grateful for everything that Dr. Ream had done over the last year, and excited to see what Mr. Wells does moving forward. I think that particularly given that we are now entering our third school year with COVID impacting kids and schools, it adds a layer that is worth considering. We don't fully understand what the impact of COVID will be to kids yet, but all of the preliminary data suggests that it's going to be pretty significant, and it's going to take a lot to support kids moving forward, particularly in terms of supporting their social emotional health and learning. And so I do think I'm really glad that Chair Miskevich had mentioned, we don't necessarily have all the resources that we need for kids. And I do think the city has a role to play in supporting our youngest citizens. And I think that includes making sure that we have strong partnerships amongst all of our community partners. I was really excited this last year that the crisis response team is now working with SROs and the school district and helping to respond to kids in crisis. So one thing that I would like for us to consider in our direction is really utilizing the ACLU's white paper as a model moving forward. I think we've heard a commitment from the superintendent and the board chair that we do truly, as a community, the district wants to work with the city in solving problems and consistently and continuously getting better. And so I think that utilizing the ACLU's white paper as an outline in moving forward and making sure that we have a very clear MOU in place, and then continuing to refine that where we see need to would be good. One other thing that I would really like to see us include in an MOU with the district is implementing a handle with care program. There's lots that you can read online if you're not sure what it is, but essentially it provides a link between the school district and responding departments, in our case, HPD, or a child care agency, giving the school a heads up when there has been some sort of traumatic or significant event that happened outside of school hours. We've seen just really incredible results in other parts of the state, particularly in the Flathead and Shelby, when they have implemented this program. And I think that it would be a very good next step to make sure that we're kind of addressing supporting kids holistically and across the community, not just in the hours that they're in school. And I think that's a place where we have a lot of influence. The other thing that I think might be worth considering moving forward, and Mr. Welts alluded to this, but CSCT, I mean, it will continue in some way, shape, or form. I know that I think DPHHS just submitted their proposal to CMS for approval of the new formula that the state, working with OPI, would like to move forward with. I know that there could potentially be some sort of permissive levy for districts around the state to help fund their part of the match, but I think it might be worth considering how we might be able to support that, because it is something that impacts families as well as kids, and has really significant impacts for families who really need it. So I think that's where I am on things. I do just want to underline too that within the ACLU's white paper guidance for MOUs, and this has been the practice in Helena anyway, and it may not be well understood, but I think explicitly making sure it's included in the MOU is that SROs are not involved in school discipline. And I think making that explicit is really important, because I know that is where a lot of data does come from in terms of students who are suspended or given detention at disproportionate rates, which does happen across the country. But that's not something that's associated with SROs. And so I think making sure that we have that clear distinction in the data to make sure that we are living up to those expectations will be important. So appreciate, Mr. Mayor, giving me a couple minutes. And those are just some of my thoughts.
Couple of minutes?
Sorry.
Jeez. Okay. Any other comments from the commission?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. So,
Go ahead.
So I think it was about a year ago that we were last talking about this, and we took our votes regarding the MOU and, said it was going to expire, draft a new one, look for, new, different, innovative ways, convene a community council to talk about things. And tonight we're talking about going forward with an MOU. There's nothing that I've heard this evening, seen in the recommendations or observed in the process, that indicates to me that the MOU that we're being asked to approve going forward with is going to be anything different than what we had in place 12 months ago, 3 months ago. So I would agree entirely with the comments of Commissioner O'Loughlin. I think I'm pretty disappointed observing the process from both an external standpoint and chatting with members of the community who did either observe or participate in it. I don't think we executed very well on it. So I'm not comfortable moving forward with this stage. I don't think we actually got a clear picture of what this MOU is going to look like, other than my understanding that it's going to be pretty much more of the same.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, where I'm at is I thank the working group for all the put into this effort, because it was a tedious and arduous effort. And just to put it plainly, is that while I do understand there were changes we were asking for, we still have to move forward because we're running out of deadline. School has what, about a month, and then we're back in school. So while I do understand that we need to continue the discussion, we still need to make a decision as to whether to have our SROs within the school system. And I fully support the SRO within the school system while we continue to work on the process. So, Madam Manager, do you have your directive?
Yes, sir. I believe I've heard that you would support my continuing to work with the school district to utilize the ACLU's white paper. Just confirming, you utilize the ACLU's white paper, which outlines specific sections and additions. I do believe I heard support for additional resources from the city and increased clarity on what the role of the SRO is in the school and our officers. Also that I'm not sure that I have consensus that the city is making a commitment to provide additional resources to the students.
I don't think we made that commitment. We don't have that consensus. I don't think we have that consensus.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I might even suggest, as conversations with the district continue, if there are opportunities that for additional partnership or ideas, maybe those can come to the commission for consideration as they arise.
Thank you. And we don't know what the additional resources look like. So we can't, we can't commit to something we don't even know what it's about.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yes, and then I would like to just take a minute, Mayor, before we close, and respectfully ask that Chief Hagan be given an opportunity to speak.
Oh,
sure. Chief Hagan has not had an opportunity to share his thoughts, and these are his officers as well. And would like to make sure, since this is the space in which we move to the next page, he gets that opportunity if you're open to that.
Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. Good evening.
Good evening.
I didn't really realize I was going to speak, so I'll be very brief. I do support using the ACLU white paper as the guide that we use moving forward. What that white paper does suggest is very much what we're doing. It also gives us more opportunity to collect the data that we've been asked for throughout this process that's been very difficult for us to obtain. It gives very clear guidance to the officers. Our prior MOU did not do that. I think this is a significant change in transparency, and I think that is more of what we're looking for as a community, is transparency in our police department. So I do appreciate the working group. Barrick, I really appreciate all the hard work you did. I know it was difficult at times kind of wrangling the group. So I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the city managers bearing a lot of this burden throughout the process. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Everson, you have anything you want to add to that?
I would just say it was a challenging conversation at times, I believe, because the passions were so high. I think there was just to clarify some remarks, there was an arc of conversation about what the ideal outcome and role of SROs would be and what the risks and unintended consequences could be, which is shared in the memo to you. Ultimately, I heard a strong desire from the group, as your city manager shared with you, for there to be another conversation that most likely needs to come from the community or the district that really digs into that broader conversation of what are all of the things that could be done to support students. But I appreciated the opportunity to help facilitate and appreciate your all's continued deliberations on this.
Thank you. Are you done, Madam Manager?
No, sir.
Please continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Hagan and Barrick. And last item is on the mental health. So moving forward, we have 3 remaining police reform conversations. And I'm sorry, I'm having issues with my camera tonight. 3 remaining police reform conversations pending. The next one would be the mental health gap, and it's actually the mapping and then a gap assessment to move forward the implementation of potential new systems. Then we have also our policies and procedures, and then last, our data and resources. In my MOU to you all, I suggest that the city does not have a role in mental health. We've not had those resources within the city. The city, interestingly, I understand that we as a community manage the impacts of unmanaged mental health and not enough and insufficient support to mental health services in the community. The City of Helena has not made a commitment financially within its operations or outwardly in other ways, except for trying to use the police reform conversation to address it. Ultimately, I do not believe this is an opportunity we should be leading, and it is something we should be instead having a broader conversation with the our county health, for example, with other providers, and how we could improve as a community this conversation. But again, I am not a thought leader on mental health, and you know, I'm a city manager trying to help move forward this community on those items and areas in which we actually have called out in our city code and in our city charter as our primary duties. So my intention is tonight to request clarification if you are in support or not in moving forward with the mental health program problems and finding what are the gaps, and then additionally mapping out the resources already there. That does not mean in a broader sense that the city doesn't have a role. I just don't know that the police reform is the place for those conversations to actually happen. Over the last several days and several weeks, we've been having conversations around homelessness. We've been having conversations around what resources the county offers and what the city has traditionally managed within our very limited role in mental health management in the community. That is a bigger policy conversation that this commission hasn't had. I do intend to bring forward a broader conversation to you all for policy decision making on what is the city's role in social services overall. That includes mental health, as well as homelessness and addressing some of the social issues that we have not as a community leaned into, and whether or not they're right or wrong, making them a part of our operation has not occurred. So tonight I want to make sure that in fact you do want to continue to move forward. Like I said, I know that we have a limited time with Chief Hagan, who is retiring, and I would like for us to be thoughtful about the time we spend with him and narrowing in on the policies, procedures, and data that really help inform this conversation in a broader sense on the police reform work.
Thank you. Comments or questions from the commission on the mental health
Mr. Mayor.
aspect? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
So one of the committees that you assigned me to, I think a long time ago, it seems like, was the Clark County Behavioral Health Local Advisory Committee. And as I've been a part of a number of those meetings, I'm really aware of the variety of agencies and individuals that, you know, a conversation like this might be more appropriate than in the context of police reform. So I don't know whether that might be the place to approach this or the possibility.
I agree with you, Commissioner, because just if we do have that organization, like I always say, we need everybody at the table. And at that forum, at that Lewis and Clark Behavioral Forum, you do have everybody at the table. So I think we can start working with them. We can start working with them like that.
Mr. Mayor. I would just say I think that making sure that we are including being part of a broader partnership in terms of how we are supporting those dealing with a mental health crisis, or, you know, preventing folks from getting to a place where they're having a mental health crisis. One thing that I always reflect on every morning when we get our report from HPD about all of the calls that have come in is really there's three categories that I feel like they fall into. One is substance abuse, one is family and domestic violence, and the other is a mental health crisis. And obviously, and you know, this is part of the conversation yesterday at our joint city county meeting is you know, we really do need to start figuring out how do we get to root causes and helping alleviate those challenges. And so I think obviously the city's not going to solve this on its own. And so having a broader conversation, I'm supportive of, but I do want to make sure that the police department is involved, because so much of what they're having to deal with is folks who are having either mental health crisis or just mental health issues in general. And so making sure that they're part of that conversation, I think, is important as we're moving forward here. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission?
Mayor.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, this is an interesting conversation, because I think that when we started these discussions and had some of the, you know, broader presentations from the police department, I think there was consensus amongst this group that the city can and probably should play a bigger role in really tackling access to mental health services and the ultimate interaction that those that are facing mental health and substance use disorder, their interaction with city officials and what that might look like. So, you know, I remember very clearly early on when we started these conversations, and this was a conversation with Chief Hagan, that, you know, if this commission is willing to take this on, let's do it, right? Like, can we think of a better model? Those are my words, not Chief Hagan's, but I think he really did say to me, if the commission is willing to do this, you know, so often we have these high level conversations and then it just fades away. And so, you know, I would love to see the commission and the city really invest the time and energy to thinking and rethinking what this structure could look like. there are models out there, right? And the commission has gotten emails from community members and experts in these fields about cahoots in Eugene and other models, right? Those are models that are housed within city operations and often within the city police department. So I think it's a little short-sighted to say this is not our responsibility. We don't play a role. It is accurate to say we are not playing a role, right? We are asking our police department to take this on. And I think that will continue. So from my perspective, I think this is something. Now, I have a limited amount of time on the commission. So ultimately, what you all decide to do, I think is important. But I do worry about the city sort of doing what I think Chief Hagan was concerned might happen, that we have some initial conversations and then we back away from it. So I think we could have a role. I'm definitely open to the city manager's recommendations of what that role should be. But I don't necessarily support saying we don't have a role at all.
Thank you, Commissioner. I see Commissioner Halliday just turned on his mic. So go ahead, Commissioner.
Sure. So, I mean, I think I probably agree with most, if not all, of what Commissioner O'Loughlin just stated. You know, it's not I don't think it's any surprise that when we went down this road initially, I expressed a great deal of skepticism as to the efficacy of any of these working groups. Out of concern that, we would get to this point in the process a year out, people will have lost interest in these processes and things just peter out. This is apropos to, this is germane to the city's work, right? We every year around this time of year, without fail, we get reports of individuals experiencing mental health crises, incidents of people complaining about persons downtown who may or may not be experiencing mental health issues, people who require some level of intervention that would be better suited for someone who's not a Helena police officer. I'm not saying they don't do a great job. In fact, pretty much I have only ever heard rave reviews of how well our officers do in dealing with circumstances that are really not their core job. And it is laudable and it is impressive, the work that they do on it, but it's not their job, and there is a better way. And I've always appreciated that about Chief Hagan's position here of, what can we look to that is better? And every year we get these complaints. Every year we all say, let's do something about it. We all say, let's have a higher level conversation. Let's get all the stakeholders to the table. Let's figure out where the big picture questions are. Let's do this and that. And we have some meetings, we have some established working groups that have been in existence for decades, and nothing occurs. And here we have this process set up, right? It's ready to go. It's got people assigned to it. It's got a pretty broad-based group, and it's specifically focusing on an area that is putting pressure on City of Helena police officers. So it's directly with the
You're breaking up, Commissioner.
In the city's concern. Yes, we're not doing it right now. We're not doing it right now, but we should. And it's concerning to me that we're going to sort of move it away from the City of Helena's purview. Doesn't mean we can't participate in these other opportunities. But why not talk about what the model looks like for the city, for our police, even while we participate in these broader conversations with our community partners? Because it feels like a little bit of a punt to say, this isn't really our thing. Let's go out and talk about it with other people.
Thank you, Commissioner. While I agree with everything everybody has said, but my point here is that the mental health issue in the city is not only city residents. Like I said yesterday at our county health meeting, everybody needs to come to the table. because this is an everybody issue. This is not just city issue. And so we already have a behavioral health group, the city county behavioral health group. Why are we not utilizing that group to continue with the issues we have? But if we're going to allow only the city to do all these things, I don't know. I think we're spread too thin. And that's just my thought on it, because we have a group. Let's utilize the group and let's stay involved.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
can I ask a quick question about the crisis response team to either the city manager or the chief?
Go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, obviously, the crisis response team right now is a partnership that we're involved with that is led by, I believe, the county. And I'm wondering, Chief, if you know what the breakdown is in terms of, or general breakdown in terms of them responding to county calls versus city calls.
Commissioner, at this point, I don't know what the breakdown is. I would think it's probably close to 75-25 city.
Okay.
Generally speaking, what the mental health, the crisis mental health call load is, the city handles about 75% of the protective custodies as compared to the county. I would think that would be pretty consistent even with the mobile crisis response.
Awesome. Well, I think I'm really excited about the work they've been doing. Obviously, staffing for any type of counselors is very difficult in Montana, including mental health care professionals. But I do think that that's obviously they're part of this conversation and an entry point for us to really make some progress. So I think, Mayor, your comments I think are spot on in terms of making sure that we're utilizing all the resources, but and just like we heard yesterday in the joint city county meeting, people come into town to get services that, even if they're not necessarily from the city of Helena. So I do think making sure that we have all these folks at the table is going to be really important if we actually want to solve some of the root causes that lead to all these issues.
Thank you. Any final comments from the commission? Okay. Madam Manager, there is a clear consensus on yes, we need to continue to discuss mental health within the city.
Under the police reform program.
Right.
Thank you. All right. Next, Mayor, I would like to ask that completes the conversation around the update on school resource officers, and ask and request that we move item 5B up to and above item 5A so that we can keep both the transit related update and the no, I'm sorry, I see it all. I'm sorry, it was already completed. Was there, I'm sorry, can I ask Madam the city clerk? It looks like the agenda has been changed. I just want to make sure that we're, and also Thomas, it looks like the current agenda reads that the direction from the commission on this one first is the Civic Center, then comes transportation systems and transportation's transit update and transportation street assessment. Those have been moved together. Was that a revision today already? I'm trying to understand, or is it that you wanted to move them up before the Civic Center conversation?
That's correct, Madam Manager. Move the item 5B to before the Civic Center discussion.
And 5C as well, or just 5B?
Just 5B.
Thank you.
Are you done?
Yeah, so can we do that, make that modification?
To have 5A first and 5A second?
Correct.
Okay. City Attorney, update.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Department directions and feedback. Transportation system and street assessment, Manager Hollishock or Director Kanaki?
Yes, thank you. I'll just quickly step out of the way for Commissioner or for Director Kanopke to share his update on the street assessment and the next steps. This conversation has been part of a larger conversation broadly on overall on our assessments, and I want to just go ahead and turn it over to Director Kanopke. Thank you.
You have the floor, Director.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, and City Manager. So the street assessments, there's been a lot of discussion over the past couple months, specifically around the airport and the whether or not the street assessments are applicable to airport and then paying the assessments. I'm just going to be brief on this topic because there's a lot more behind it, that a lot more details, but ultimately the street assessments, it was determined do not apply to the airport, and thus the assessments that would have been levied toward the airport would not be paid. So that amount is basically a revenue shortfall for the streets fund 201. The other topic on talking about the assessments is during the several sidewalk meetings, including the final one, there was support for the slip, trip, and fall and the safe routes to school programs. There was another item that also the commission showed support, is the additional adding of the FTE and long-term temps to start a city concrete crew to do small sidewalk repair projects, specifically a lot of the slip, trip, and fall requests and complaints. The approved preliminary budget, the programs were approved through amendments. The staffing was not, and just wanted to bring this up, that some of these programs will take time to get up and running. The additional staff that was discussed would help the implementation and the efficiency of these programs to move them along and get the work out into the community. And sidewalks, as you well know, fit into several of the city commission strategic outcomes and key activities. So moving forward, we'd like to consider a staff budget amendment to cover the loss of the airport assessment revenue, the street assessment revenue from the airport, and the additional staffing for the sidewalk programs. Having this dedicated group of staff would allow continuity and efficiency for the programs. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. There are also some possible alternatives if you wish to discuss them.
Thank you, Director. Comments or questions from the commission?
Yeah, Mayor, I do have just a couple quick questions.
Please go ahead.
I'm wondering if you all have the dollar amount that we're talking about for each of these two items. I didn't see that in the memo. And then the second question I have is, can you remind me how long the airport has not paid street assessment? Is this the first fiscal year that has occurred, or has there been multiple years? Okay, so city manager is saying 3. So maybe just a follow up to that is, have we reflected an increase in the street assessment in past years because of that, or is this the first year that the city is recommending that action? So those two questions.
Mayor and Commissioners, the past years we've absorbed the loss of revenue by not completing either maintenance or just pulled back, so that we would cover our so we wouldn't go over budget basically. And as far as the exact amounts, I'm looking those up for you right now and hope to have those in a few seconds for you.
Director Kanopke, while you're looking it up, when you say pulled back and not completed, what do you mean? Which areas?
So that would have been basically in the maintenance side. We would have just left some extra money, asphalt or the dirt street or whatever, to make sure that we we constantly are monitoring our budgets, and we're making sure that, you know, we're hitting those. There's those areas that we try to keep in under budget every year so that the program is what we're stating it is.
Thank you.
Mayor and Commissioners, the additional staffing totals is about 115,000, and then the lost airport revenue is approximately 160,000.
What was, Mr. Mayor, what was that first dollar amount?
115,000.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a
Please.
question? I think I know the answer to this, but for the volunteer sidewalk program, how long is the waiting list on that right now?
2 years.
Right?
Mayor and Commissioners, Mayor, you're correct. We did do some modernizations to that program, so we're hoping to clear some of those out. We're also hoping to some of those requests on the volunteer sidewalk program was basically just trip hazards, which is grinding down a panel or an edge. We have received the grinder and the vacuum that goes with it. And we've been out, we tested it last week. The staff got the hang of it. And so we have first initially compiled a list of those in the 6th ward that were basically grind only. And then we're going to go back and go through the requests of the volunteer sidewalk program to see if which of those that we can go out and basically grind versus replacing only a single panel or whatever. So we're hoping that we knock a portion of those off. We probably won't knock as many as we hope, but you know, we're hoping that that number does go down just by a simple grind of a couple panels.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I guess I would just note that anything that we can do to start expediting some of this, I think is really important. And I think our return on investment on this will be significant, not only in monetary dollars, but also in, you know, community support and safety, because I know there are lots of folks who would like to, who don't necessarily need to replace a whole sidewalk and would love to get things done sooner, but given that wait, you know, obviously we can't do that right now. So, and I believe that, I don't know when they cut it, but the city used to have folks that, I don't know how long ago that was, that would, you know, help with this. So I think anything we can do to help expedite that would be good.
I'll second that. Any other comments from the commission?
Yeah, Mayor, I just a procedural question, because I'm trying to remember. I know that we held street assessment when we took action. So we have not set street assessment, and so what you're bringing forward is informational to then set up the public hearing with these rate increases for this upcoming year, or did we set it and this is amending it?
We have not set those, Commissioner. This would be to add into the conversation this element. Yes.
And can you remind me, so these are the 2 increases to those assessment, or is this on top of what had previously been proposed by staff?
So this is on top of as you recall, during the conversations, I shared in the broad sense of the sidewalk program, the dollars did not include the staff. This is the amendment to that budget conversation in the sidewalks broader to include the 115. So that 115,000. I'll tell you that David and Sheila are working on the next steps with the sidewalk program to share how that plays out with the street assessments overall. And David, I can't recall, can you share when that is on the agenda or your next steps there?
As far as the next steps for the street assessment,
Yes, the street assessment, and as part of that, the sidewalk conversation.
so we have set up the ROI for the 9th, and then I believe it's the 23rd for the public meeting for the street assessment.
Okay, and Mayor, I just have one more question, I think.
Please, go ahead.
So in relation to the airport assessment, so I'm a little confused. We're, less than a month out here of setting our budget. Did we assume in revenue coming into the street fund that the airport would pay the assessment?
So our projected revenues always reflect the previous year. So the previous 2 years have not reflected payment by the airport. So the assumption that they wouldn't pay this year, and as a result, the 115 would need to be revised, is kind of not like for like, but it's similar in its projection, which is that there's activity that the airport has not been paying for. But ultimately, the actual dollar amount, the revenues themselves, and Sheila, you can jump in if I'm incorrect, but certainly the projections in those revenues actually reflect the loss and have for a couple of years.
Okay, so we built a budget under expenditures with the lower revenue amount. So I'm not totally sure I understand why we need to raise the assessment.
We haven't raised it yet. We're asking that, in fact, the 115,000 be considered as part of the for future conversation coming to address and increase the rates. So this is on top of the additional conversation we anticipate having. Sheila, but you can certainly jump in, Sheila, and add more clarity.
Thank you, City Manager and Commissioners. When we proposed the projected forecast, it did not include revenue from the airport, as it was not reflected in the actuals, which is what we forecasted it off of. The Commission had desired, through conversations with Director Konopka and the other staff members for these projects, it was intended to have the increase for the additional staff as a proposed amendment. It just was not incorporated in the final amendments for the preliminary budget adoption. And so at this time, neither the revenue for the staff to carry out these projects or the staff are currently in the preliminary budget. And that is why Director Konopka is bringing this forward for your consideration. In order to fund those positions, we will need to have rate increases. Originally, we had indicated that there were no rate increases, and the Commission desired to put that on hold for further consideration.
So if I understand the 115,000 tied to staffing, you need the revenue in order to cover the new expenditures. What I'm not understanding is why we're raising the rates when we already assumed a budget that didn't reflect that revenue from the airport assessments. But what I think I'm hearing now is that we need 160,000 more in revenue because the airport hasn't paid its assessment, even though we didn't reflect that revenue to begin with. And I'm not sure what that is, what expenditures that is tied to. Is that also tied to this staffing?
Very good question. David, can you please clarify? Are you saying that you're $115,000 under budget, or are you saying in order to have the robust conversation planned around sidewalks, you need to ensure that that $115,000 is included? That $115,000 will result in the rates going up. So going into this conversation, that is the assumption here. You're not asking for a rate increase tonight because these are just admin meetings. This is the opportunity to share, hey, this has happened. Is that correct? What is the purpose of the 115, and who is it? Is it someone currently, or is it someone later?
Mayor, City Commission, and City Manager, the 115 and the 160 are two separate issues. The 115 is to help facilitate the new programs the slip, trip, and fall, and the safe routes to school. That is 1 FTE and 2 long-term seasonals. The 1 FTE would be tasked in assisting the volunteer sidewalk program through estimates as they come in, and then also going out and looking at the slip, trip, and fall complaints as they come in, and also starting to look at the safe routes to school. So the 115 would be in addition to the current staff. We can, absorb these duties with current staff, but I believe, and it's my opinion, that the new programs would suffer because we would be pulling staff from other duties. And so the 115 is for staff to staff the sidewalks only and has no tie to the airport assessments.
Has the city adopted in the current budget these programs?
The 2 programs, the slip, trip, and fall, and the safe routes to school, were adopted in the during the preliminary budget session as amendments from the commission.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm not confused by the 115. I'm confused by the 160.
Mayor and Commissioners, the 160 may have been a miscommunication on my part, that the revenues were projected into the current budget. So in that thought that would, since our excess surplus was spent down to such a point that if there was 160 short in revenue, then we would be dipping into the operational reserves, which is not always the best policy.
But that's not the case.
I see Director Danielson has her hand raised, and maybe she can shed some light on that.
Thank you, Director Knopke and Mayor and Commissioners. So I believe what Director Knopke is trying to communicate is that the commission chose to draw down every reserve, all of the excess reserve that is for capital in the preliminary budget. And that was the commission's direction, and we took that. Part of that was all of those projects that didn't have the extra staff to support those projects. In drawing down all those excess reserves, that leaves the street fund with no capital funding for fiscal 23 or beyond. It's certainly okay to leave it as is, but there will be no reserve to carry forward in order to build for future capital projects in fiscal 23.
So just to underscore what Sheila, what you're saying is that we cannot implement the programs that the commission adopted without the staff.
That is correct.
And the forced conversation is because we spent down the other dollars on other projects.
So how was it implemented before?
It's new, it hasn't been.
The sidewalks?
Mayor and Commissioners, the slip, trip, and fall program was added as an amendment. It's in addition to, it was to look at those slip, trip, and fall hazards, those vertical deflections, the sidewalks that just have settled or have been heaved by tree roots. And then the safe routes to school, that was brought up a few years ago, where the commission directed on a couple programs that came out of capital. The first one, I believe, was the Montana Highland crossing, and then the Night Streets design came through, and we got the Night Street design through, but no monies to implement it. So during the preliminary budget approval through an amendment, the Night Street construction was funded. Then there was an additional $200,000 set aside for the safe routes to school. And during those conversations, we had discussed a master plan and other ways to prioritize. And it was determined that staff could start that project moving forward, starting the prioritization list of these safe routes to school projects. But that was an additional duty that came out of the formation of those programs.
So I think now what I'm hearing is that this is the only increase to the assessments. Because I think we knew, we knew we were going to have a conversation about whether or not we needed to increase streets assessment. That's why we pulled it and held it. So what you're telling us now is that this isn't really related to the airport at all. That revenue is not reflected in our budget, and that this is tied to the new projects that the commission supported during the budget.
Commissioner, if I may, Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, please.
It's indirectly, as a result of the airport, obviously that additional revenue is not being collected in order to support these programs. With the loss of that revenue, we've depleted, with the programs that were asked for, we've completely depleted the excess reserves that are used to maintain for capital purposes. So, if we had continued to receive the airport revenue, we likely wouldn't need to ask for, an equivalent increase of what Dr. Konopka is referring to now. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Director Danielson. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Couple of questions. So I guess one question. I'm wondering if there are other places that we have budgeted money, for example, like on the phase 2 of Rodney. I know that we're using a number of different places to fund that project. And I'm wondering, are there places that we can fund other projects with ARPA money to offset that? And then my second question is too, and obviously we don't want to make decisions based on what Congress is doing, but I do know that part of the mini omnibus bill that has just come out of some of the House committees, one of those bills included money for safe routes to schools. Obviously it has to make it through the House floor and over to the Senate and without any changes, but something to keep in mind that the likelihood of there was very little discussion or pushback on in terms of funding for school related infrastructure projects. And so something to think about in terms of other opportunities for federal money that we haven't had in recent years. But I am curious if there are ways that we could either offset with ARPA money in other places, or I guess when we would also get an update on, what a rate increase would actually look like, because I know we haven't gotten, that yet in terms of what it would cost for the average ratepayer. But those are just some things that I'd like for us to consider.
Thank you.
Mayor and Commissioner, oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
I'm
Commissioner.
Curious, when did we know that we weren't going to receive, or that well, let's start it this way. When did we make the decision that we're not going to seek the money from the airport anymore?
Right. Because I thought we were in discussion with that. That's a good question.
We haven't brought to you the settlement conversation. The assumption that this has anything to do with the airport, aside from the lost revenue, is the place from which we begin. Either way, we still are without funding, but we are in negotiations and we haven't made a decision.
Okay, but I'm just asking because the start of this conversation was we're not going after the airport revenue. We've made a decision that that's not in the budget anymore. And now we're talking about increasing all other ratepayers' rates to offset the non-payment by the airport, which I think is something that I brought up when we renewed the airport charter, that we were very likely not going to see the airport money ever again the moment we made that decision, and that it was going to result in an increase for all other ratepayers in the city of Helena. And now I'm concerned that that's actually come to pass, that we're never going to see that money, and we are talking about raising everybody's rates as a direct result.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sidewalks, I understand that I have to share to you guys. I don't see anywhere in the memo that this was a point that we were actually trying to get across. So that's why I'm struggling to figure out how this is happening this way first. Second, the airport revenues and their assessments overall is a separate conversation. What the statement was in the background was that during the reauthorization process, the city was made aware and advised that the city payments on the FAA is considered a revenue diversion program, and the city has always been, and sidewalks have always been an issue. So what we are attempting to set up is the next bigger conversation with you all about assessments. It's not about the airport. As far as the airport is concerned, we are still in negotiations with the airport. And I know that Thomas, I don't know that that was the intention of this conversation, frankly, but I do believe that we are in a different space. Commissioner Halliday, to your point, the city has not put together a memorandum of understanding with or addressed the airport's non-payment for the last 3 years. As Commissioner O'Loughlin points out, the second part of that is that we have to enter in an MOU to return some form of dollars, and that work has not been done. The bigger picture of whether or not other ratepayers have been paying for the airport is something that's been going on for a couple of years. No one has said differently to date. So I just want to clarify, this isn't about the airport or their lack of payment. This is about the assessments that we aren't able to collect. Thomas, I'm not sure you are intending to share your strategy on that and the work that we've been doing with our legal. And I don't want to put you in that bad spot, but at the same time, it feels as though we've gotten there. So I want to be careful and at the same time be transparent.
Sure. Well, I guess I'm just a little confused. And Thomas, don't share your legal thoughts with us if it's going to jeopardize our position. The reason I'm asking is when this discussion started this evening, maybe I misunderstood. And if staff wants to clarify, or if I'm just my usual dopey self, I thought it was said that we are not collecting the airport revenue anymore, and that decision had been made. That was my understanding. So if that's not the direct representation, then I apologize for that misunderstanding, but I just want to understand that, one. And two, the reason that I think it's come up is that the memo says the increase, the 2.43% increase, is needed to cover the loss of assessment revenue from the airport. So it seems like that's directly and squarely in front of the commission to talk about. And this is really fast, because this was my concern when I asked street maintenance to be pulled, was that we are now talking about it on August 3rd. We've got to get the thing approved on Monday so that it can be properly legally noticed, so we can do it by the August 21 or 23 date, or whatever, 24 date. That's really fast for us to talk about it. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to make Thomas spill his special sauce. I'm not trying to have a tangential conversation about something that's in our memo, but I guess I'm just asking for the ratepayers.
Oh shoot!
What I'm reading is
you broke up, Commissioner Halliday.
That they're respective that Mayor Collins, Commissioner Logan, Commissioner Dean's assessments are going up next year, 2.43% specifically because the airport hasn't paid. That's what our memo says.
You're
That's
right.
why I want to ask about this. And that's why I'm really interested in Commissioner O'Loughlin's question of when was it decided we needed to increase rates to cover the airport, since it sounds like we had already budgeted for that loss in our revenues. And it just seems like we had this opportunity, had this conversation quite some time ago. We knew this stuff was coming, and now we're forced to have it now, whether we like it or not, I think, because these increases, we could be frankly accused of it being relatively non-transparent, discussing it on Wednesday, passing it on Monday, and that's it.
Totally. Yeah, I don't, Sheila, can I ask a clarifying question of Sheila? Did you have a chance to look at this before it came before the commission? Before it came to this meeting?
Director Konopka and I discussed the rate increases and looking at how to pay for the additional staff to carry out the projects and to build up reserves. And the topic of the lost revenue from the airport has contributed to the decline in the excess reserves. I think ultimately Director Konopka broke it out purposely for the commission to consider, but priority wise, he would like the 1.82% in order to cover the staff to carry out the projects.
So the intention is to build to your next question, Commissioner Halliday, the 2.43% that you're suggesting is to build back reserves on the taxpayer because the airport is not paying. Is that correct, Sheila?
Not entirely, no. And perhaps Director Konopka can help clarify as well.
So I think this was a misunderstanding that the airport revenue was budgeted when it really was not. And so the intent was to recover the revenue that would have been budgeted and not actually there through this increase. But since it is not actually budgeted, then that portion of the increase is not needed.
Yeah, I think we have just a general miscommunication internally. I have to tell you that's just played out here because Thomas and I have a different impression on what we're going to be receiving. So that's first. So I have to say to you guys, I would almost want to pull this as an item for this discussion just because it needs baked better. And I don't know that it has any relevance to our conversation on Monday. It's too fast.
Well, I hear you, Madam Hollishock. I think you read my mind because that is exactly what we're about to do.
Okay.
But we don't have time to do this, right? If we need a rate increase this year, it has to go out Monday, doesn't it, Thomas, Sheila?
That is correct.
But the rate increase is not about these. Are we, okay, separately, then team, Sheila, David, are we recommending a rate increase otherwise on Monday if we take out this 115,000?
Mayor and Commissioner, City Manager, the way the ROI was written was to include the 4.25 so that they gave the commission flexibility to go down and not up if there was a, because we can only go down as far as the rates once it is set as the ROI. So this does not hold to the 4.25. It can always be 1 or 0 at the commission's discretion.
Shit, you lost me more than before.
So Mayor, may I make one more comment? So I'm going back to my notes when I was talking about this with Director Konopke, and we modeled out what our current assessment base is and what it would take to generate, different buckets of money. And we had outlined a few of the things that were of issue with the current appropriations and revenue for the streets fund. One was additional funding needed to support the staff to carry out the projects that were approved in the preliminary budget. One of the other topics that came up during our discussion is that because we didn't have that airport revenue, there was not that additional revenue to support capital projects for future, for the future, because we have drawn down all of our excess reserves in the fund. And then the third item was that we believed a rate increase was also needed in order to support the debt service payment that the commission directed the staff that they desired to have debt service for the streets fund, but no appropriation to pay for the debt service. Now, granted, the debt service likely won't happen until later in the year, but there's no funding to support the payment for the debt service. So those were the primary points of asking for the rate increases.
So I guess I have a question on that, because we had a bit of a back and forth on the 28th, Ms. Danielson, about what the street fund is actually bringing in each year, putting aside the airport's refusal to pay its assessments, and what the street fund actually expends when we're not sending excess reserves out the door, which kind of muddies the expense. It makes expenses exceed revenues, but because it's one-time only expenditures. And again, unless I'm misunderstanding, and especially given that we are not taking on new debt next year other than Ninth Street, from what I understood, and maybe there's something else in there, it looked like that fund had a apples to apples year over year, anywhere from $1.3 to $1.5 million revenue over expenditures on any given year. And that the only reason it looks low is a combination of one-time only spending of excess reserves and some other capital that's going out the door. But I don't understand why we don't have sufficient, even if we dipped into that 15% reserve with the sort of critical reserve, until revenues come in, we should wind up over $1 million in the black at the end of the year. And I guess I'm concerned because we haven't seen that breakdown, and we're being asked to raise street maintenance because one party is not paying. What is our projection, putting aside these one-time only expenditures, of the street maintenance district of revenues over expenditures for next year?
Commissioner, I'm looking at the budget worksheet, and revenues over basically under expenditures for fiscal 22 is projected at a negative $2.5 million. And purposefully to draw down the excess reserves that were in the fund as of the end of, projected to be as of the end of fiscal 21. Excess reserves have been in this fund anywhere between $2.8 to $4.8 million. If we carry out all of the projects and take on the debt service that the commission had adopted in the preliminary budget, at the end of fiscal 22, we'll have an excess reserve of $80,000.
But
Okay,
is that excess 80 reserve above the sort of 15% reserve that we say is in there, or is that truly above zero?
That is the excess reserve above the 18%. So in this particular fund, they're operational reserve. And I'd like to clarify that that reserve is an operational reserve. So should something negatively impact where we weren't able to collect revenues, that particular reserve would carry the operations for about 90 days. Anything above and beyond that would be for capital.
So how much, you said we're showing a negative to some odd expenditures over revenues, right? How much excess reserve money are we outlaying this year?
Excess reserve from the prior year?
Yeah, so we're doing capital outlay using excess reserve that's in the fund.
So most of the, so 1.3 million of that, you'd have to take the 2.4 less
Is
the
that
1.3
amount?
million. Because the 1.3 is debt service.
That's
I'm
why
sorry.
I have to break out service. I just want to know how much.
He's breaking up, darn it.
I'm trying to how much we're laying.
I didn't get that. You broke up, Commissioner.
Okay, I'll try again. I'm just trying to figure out how much cash we're outlaying in this fund. That comparative to how negative we are showing. Right? Does our cash outlay eclipse the negative?
look, okay. Commissioner, you're breaking up, and this conversation is not going the way we're going. Commissioner, you're breaking up.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So, Madam Hollishock,
this is not. This is a
no.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we should be better prepared to come back next week and share to you.
Yes, please.
In a different
This
conversation.
is not going anyway.
Yeah. My apologies, this was not caught sooner.
Okay. We will move along. I'm going straight to requests from exploration work. Exploration work. Madam Hollishock.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to turn it over to Thomas, who can share more around his reach and what the actual reach is. I do believe that the group from Exploration Works is here. As we shared before, they had wanted to remove the city from the deed onto that property that Exploration Works is within. The city has maintained its ownership on, and wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to ask any further questions of Exploration Works before, and then also ask direction as to whether or not you would like for us to move forward on removing the city from that deed.
Thomas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'll make this brief. We did cover most of this in our admin meeting 2 weeks ago, and I apologize for not attaching the memo that has the bulk of the background information. Just real briefly, the city granted or went into a partnership with Community Works, formerly known as Community Works, now Exploration Works, to construct the museum there. The city used a little over $900,000 of the former downtown Urban Renewal District tax increment financing funds to assist with that partnership. The city and EWI entered into a agreement which gave the city at this point now approximately 39% ownership in the property. the board and two board members here, I think Chairman and Ms. Fever are on the call or on the meeting, have approached the city about the city releasing its interest in the property and improvements, so that they might be able to move forward more easily with some future projects that may not be defined at this point. And so just wanted to get commission direction on whether to proceed with the process to release the city's interest or delay it until there's some more defined project that the city can weigh upon as to whether it should or should not release its interest. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Comments from the commission.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I just have a question. I mean, how did they get financing at the beginning then? Because it was that not an issue before, and they think it would be an issue now?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Dean, commissioners, I don't know the answer to that question. The agreement was, let me pull it up, back in 2004, 2003, 2004. And so I don't know what Community Works, Exploration Works, how they paid for their end of the property improvements at the time. I suspect Ms. Fever Ellen might have a better knowledge of that.
Madam Clerk, would you upgrade Ms. Fever, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Give me just a moment.
Go ahead, Ms. Fever.
I was the chairman of the board at the time that the city commission did award the TIF money to the partnership that built the building. Exploration Works, part of the financing came from contractors who donated their work or a portion of it, from very generous contributors in our community. For instance, the land was given to us to build the building on. And then there was a ton of volunteer labor. So a lot of, well, we have one wall, for instance, that is built of hay bales. And it was one of the very early on buildings in our community, maybe the first, that was, I can't remember the acronym, but the recognized by engineers and scientists as being energy efficient. So it was a community effort to build the building, and we did not we did not borrow money to build the building.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the commission?
I guess maybe a question, Mayor, for the city attorney. From your perspective, is there a downside to, or any risk in relinquishing our right? I mean, I understand that we have a right in this particular property, but like, is there, from your perspective, a downside for the city?
Mayor, Commissioner Lachlan, I think one potential aspect, especially if the commission's choice is to proceed and completely waive its interest, is you'll remember that the housing trust fund setup required that disposition of property, and I think this would fall into it. Disposition of those funds would have to go into the housing trust fund. So that's one aspect of it. Is where is the money going to be waived or not? And two, I mean, it's not really a con or a negative, but the city would be giving up any interest it has. And so if in the future the city did want to keep that, the city would not have that. But again, without knowing what the future holds, it's hard to say whether that's a hard pro or con at this point.
Is there a financial aspect to this? Or what's the financial aspect to it, Mr. Jordan?
Mayor Collins, I'm not sure I understand the financial aspect. I mean, the commission could, I guess, waive its interest and not seek to recoup the $900,000, which is what I believe Exploration Works is asking for. I would also point out that having the 39% interest in the building and property also gives the city a say over what happens with that property. I'm not saying that Exploration Works has plans to do something different, but if they were to move out, sell the property, the city would not have an interest in that.
I see Ms. Fever hand is up. Madam Clerk, would you put her through?
Well, one of the things that I would appreciate it if the commission would recognize is that when we entered into this partnership in 2004, we were a brand new organization, and there were a lot of questions about would we be financially successful. Well, 16 or 17 years later, I think that we've demonstrated that we are a vibrant part of this community, and we've fulfilled the public responsibilities and commitments that we made when we got the TIF money. And as far as the housing fund goes, which I think is a wonderful thing the commission has done, Exploration Works is in no position to pay money to the city for the city's portions of the building. Our mission is to run an educational program and maintain that facility. We're, like most nonprofits, not flush with funds. And so we would not be a contributor to the housing funds no matter what.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Mayor? This is
Go ahead, please.
Ellen, just to clarify, the intent of removing the city from the deed is an opportunity to seek greater debt and remove the potential view that having an additional on the deed would result in a view of the perhaps Exploration Works not being able to pay debt if they were to take it on individually. Can you share a little bit more around the intention of removal?
Well, I think after having survived the pandemic, we went through a lot of motions, and successfully so, to figure out how to survive financially while we were shut down as a museum for many months. And so, our board started thinking about how we needed to be in a position that if we needed to borrow money from a financial institution, that we were well positioned to do that, whether it be for survival or to build an addition, and hopefully it would be to build an addition to the building. And it takes a long time to work with the city and to get things done. And so we believe that it's responsible for our board to go ahead and position the organization to be able to borrow money. And we have gotten some feedback from financial institutions that since we don't own the building entirely, that might be a barrier to being able to borrow against, to mortgage the building or to borrow again with the building as security, since we're not 100% owner of the building.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Well, Mayor, I might just jump in and say I'm comfortable moving forward with directing the city manager to put forward. I think this would come as a formal resolution to us, is my understanding. So I'm comfortable with moving forward. And perhaps I'll save sort of some of my comments on that, but if once we see it formally, but I do think that given that this is an urban renewal district that has, since expired, that it makes sense. But I, would be happy to have that further conversation once it comes forward to us as a resolution.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any others?
I guess I have a question. So I thought I had read in here, but now I can't find. Does the city have right of first refusal if Exploration Works were to try to sell the building?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Dean, basically, yes. I mean, we would have to consent to that with our interest in the property, yes.
Okay. So one thing I just want, I'm a big supporter of Exploration Works, and I spend many of my days looking down on all the kids having fun out in the little garden area from my office. And so I appreciate everything that they do for the community. One thing I just want to caution is I want to be thoughtful, considering this was such a significant contribution. I know since I've been on the commission, we haven't had any, requests for TIF dollars in this amount. And so not that I think the board as of right now would, if they did sell the building, I don't necessarily think they'd be, selling it to someone who wouldn't be there to support the community or anything else. But just in the long term, I want to make sure that, it is such an integral part to the Great Northern and really brings a lot of vibrancy and excitement. And so I'm wondering if there is a way that we can be helpful in making sure they can be successful in the long term, while also recognizing the intent of supporting the city making this kind of contribution in 2004. So whether that be leaving in a right of first refusal, or ensuring that it will remain an area that can continue to provide the vibrancy that it does to the Great Northern. Because working down there, I can tell you it's like that is the most vibrant part, because it's a lot of folks that are just working in offices and not always, that is the exciting part of the Great Northern. And I would hate to lose that at some point. So I don't know if the staff has solutions to address some of those concerns, but I want to make sure that that investment by the city and by the citizens of Helena remains something that continues to make that a vibrant area for the community.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the commission? I agree with commissioners, both commissioners, as a matter of fact. So, Mr. Jordan, is it possible to have some provisions in there to safeguard what Commissioner Dean was saying?
We will certainly think about that if we want to move this forward. I would need to think through it more and try to understand how that's different than what we have now.
So I am also in favor of moving forward.
And Mayor, I would just point out, Mr. Clark has his hand raised.
Mr. who?
Clark, Brett, he's the chairman of the Exploration Board.
Yeah, right after the commissioners will open up for comments. So any other comments from the commission? Okay. Public comments. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, as City Attorney Joden said, our first hand raised is Brett Clark. He now has his mic.
You have the floor, Mr. Clark.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Collins. My name is Brett Clark. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of Directors of Exploration Works. And I'd raised my hand to make a couple of points that Ellen astutely made after I raised my hand. I do want to say thank you to the commissioners and to you for considering moving this forward. The point I would want to emphasize is that right now, at least from my point of view, there isn't much benefit to the city continuing to hold an interest in the building. It's kind of a holdover from 2004. It doesn't have any right to any use of space in the building. It doesn't gain revenue from the building. I think there used to be a maintenance agreement that no longer exists, but Exploration Works has become an institution since that time. We're teaching children science. We have Explore School for homeschooled children. We bring fun, informative exhibits to Helena all the time. And it's tremendously beneficial to the Helena community. And we want to do more. We're looking to do more. An example of that would be what Ellen pointed out, expanding the possibility of expanding our space, possibly enclosing that second floor deck so we can have more space for learning, more camps. And of course, being able to do that requires financing. And this is the complicating factor. So the point I want to impress upon the commission is that if the city were to quitclaim its interest in Exploration Works and in the building, the city would basically be giving up something that right now brings it really little benefit, so that Exploration Works can continue to provide more of the benefit to the city through its mission. I thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I have no other hands raised, and I've received no written public comment on this item.
Thank you. All right, so I think we have a consensus for you to move forward, Mr. Jordan, to look into how best we can get this going.
Got it, Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah. At this time, the rest of the agenda will go on a later agenda. I'm sorry, we have gone far too long. And so I will go on to any public comments from anyone from the public who wishes to address the commission. Madam Clerk, do you have any public comments?
Mr. Mayor, I do have a couple of hands raised. The first is Dennison Rivera.
Go ahead, Mr. Rivera.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioner, again, my name is Dennison Rivera, and I just want to point out some inconsistencies made during the SRO discussions, a general comment in regards to the claim that 50% of people were against SROs and wanted to reallocate funds. Actually, the facts prove otherwise. What it shows is that during the listening session in July, 26 people were for it, and against it was 15. That shows about a good 30% of people that were against it, and showing overwhelming 65% were for the SROs. And out of the 13 parents who spoke, 11 of them were in favor of SROs. So I think it's really important that we don't start taking statistics that are not real or not or public comments that are based on misinformation. It's a way of trying to confuse the conversation. We have to go based on facts. And the community did show overwhelming support for SROs. Also, I want to comment and say that I didn't appreciate the ACLUs and the Montana Equity Project on how they try to misalign the city manager. I think she did a phenomenal job. I was one of the panelists during the SRO discussions. And the truth is that the ACLU and Montana Equity Project had every opportunity to speak with us. There wasn't a hostile environment. We were there to speak. We were there to communicate. I actually wanted to hear their point of view. And in fact, I even spoke on their behalf, not on their behalf, but made some points they commonly make in public, just so we can have a discussion, since they didn't want to show up. And I feel like I always found that to be so disrespectful, that we had residents that were there, we had people all part of the community that were there, but these advocacy programs that say they care about the community are not there to face residents. So that for me is a big issue. So with that being said, with closing remarks, Mr. Mayor and Commission, I want you to please consider the facts. about the SRO and the community support and don't believe this 50% ridiculous notion that it was against SROs.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I do have another individual with their hand raised with their name listed only as Sean. I would ask for the record that they list their full name.
Go ahead, Sean, and please list your full name.
Hi.
Hello?
Hi there. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please list your name.
Hi, Wilmot. This is Sean White, and I apologize for that technical glitch. I know we didn't.
Did you mean Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, I apologize. I know we didn't get to it in the agenda about the leash laws on open space, but are you welcoming public comments on that or not?
The floor is open for anybody who wishes to address the commission on any topic at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were a number of phases in the agenda and the materials attached regarding the leash laws in open space. And I feel that this pales in comparison to the SRO conversation, but I've been sitting here for 2 hours and 40 minutes waiting for this to come up in the agenda. And I'm not sure that I'll be aware of when it comes up and not again. So I'm gonna just say 4 little points on this. The city has proposed a 3-phase approach to this open space issue. The first phase is to develop an educational video to share. And I just really don't think that's going to be effective. If it's bite-sized messages that maybe is going to go out through prickly pear or some other outdoor mechanism that reminds people of what good ownership behavior is, that's great. But if you're going to create any type of a video that's more than 60 minutes long, nobody's going to watch it. And so I'd like you to really think about how you're investing taxpayer dollars in creating a video that's nobody's going to watch. Phase 2 would be to implement a video and for people receiving the dog license, which I think is going to be very ineffectual. Most of the people that actually do license their pets are good dog owners. This is not the people that we're talking about. And so you're pretty much preaching to the choir. I would
please wrap up.
Oh, I only have 2 more things. That funding, instead have an animal control officer patrol the trails. Number 3 is implementing strict leash requirements, which is exactly what good pet owners don't want to see happen on our public spaces. Most people are up on the mountain, have friendly dogs, they're under control, they've lived here forever. Punishing all the residents for bad deeds of a few is not great. If we could have a mechanism for reporting bad owners with bad pets, we would have a way to actually help the city patrol those lands. So thank you for your time. I love our SRO officers. They should remain in the schools. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, at this time, I have no other hands raised and I see no written public comment.
Okay, any final comments from the commission? If not, this meeting is adjourned.